Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is another edition of the MSP Initiative, MSP Talk. It is January 9th, and now you should be into full swing, or else you're in one of those countries that falls asleep for January and then comes back in February for some reason. But that's not what's happening here in good old US of A. Got plenty of stuff going on already. It's not quite New York City where people never sleep, but there's always something happening in the sandbox. So let's get some housekeeping out of the way, and then we'll get on to the good stuff. MSPinitiative.com. This is where everything that we do is parked into one place. So if you head over to sessions, this session we are on right now is being recorded. We will upload it to our podcatchers, YouTube, and this very page. You can go backwards in time. I'll load in a second, and you can go backwards and see old sessions. Community Minds, we did our inaugural one last year in August in Denver. We have two planned for this year, one in April 17th and 18th in Nashville, and then July 24th and 25th in Denver. It's our own swing at things, right? Not trade show booths and breakout sessions. How about panels with actual MSPs on them and workshops where we do more than a 45-minute death by PowerPoint where you walk out and never actually do anything about it. So that's what Community Minds is all about. And by the way, it's 100% free for you to register as an MSP. No $3.99, $4.99, $9.99 special. You just have to get there, right? And we'll do the rest. So please join us. We built this for you. Straight up educational event. And some good networking too. We love people in the sandbox. And then, of course, we have our infamous or famous, whichever you prefer, MSP community block parties. So last year we did 6 of these. This year here are the ones that we're planning. A little bit slow internet where I'm at, but you can go to this page and you can see all of the block parties that we plan to do. Even if some are maybe in the wings, but we're still working on them. You can see them all listed here under community block parties. Some here in the US, some over in Europe, maybe our first one down in Australia. They're all here under community block parties. Here's our community offers page. These are just deals from companies from around the industry that you may take advantage of or not. It's up to you. And then lastly, our industry calendar. I know there's a bunch of people that try and collate these. I think we have somewhere between 250 and 300 events listed between now and the end of the year. Feel free to zoom all the way to December if you want. There's going to be ones that we don't even have listed on here yet because they weren't available at the time that we uploaded this all to the page. We will try and keep up with it as best we can. Bottom line is a lot of places to go if you don't want to be sitting in the basement. So there it is, MSPinitiative.com. Feel free to swing by, check it out. That out of the way, we bring our special guest on for today, Mr. Don Bentz from Visionary 360. How you doing today, Don?
Doing all right. Thanks for having me.
All good, my friend. All good. Hopefully you had a good holiday season there, and for everybody else that's following NFL season and college championship season, it's all here, right? It's all during this part of the year.
Go Big Ten.
Yeah, well, good old congratulations to all those Michigan fans out there. And I guess the former NFL coach, soon to be new NFL coach, I feel like, Harbaugh there over in Michigan. I guess I'm a de facto Penn State fan, being from Philly area, because there's no college football really happening in our part of the state. But if you want to drive to the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, past a lot of cows and farms, you'll find State College.
Yeah, you haven't been to Indiana then, where we have soybeans and corn.
Yeah, lots of corn. Yeah, Indiana. I feel like if you drive Pennsylvania, I was just talking about somebody. I was talking with Ken Patterson the other day, and he was like, "Oh, he's like, you can get everywhere you need to go in about an hour in Boston." I'm like, Michigan's a pretty big state. You start driving the other way. He's like, "No, nobody goes out there." I'm like, I mean, people live out there, Ken. But Pennsylvania's a big state too, right? There's Philly, State College in the middle, Pittsburgh, which sometimes I feel like they're really Ohio. And then you finally get to Ohio, keep driving, and you could Ohio, there's no bends in the road. It's just straight. And then you get to Indiana. I have driven to and from South Bend, Indiana.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, it was a cool experience over there at Notre Dame. And then I did drive all the way to Michigan and back for the Super Bowl in 2017, 2018, and saw our friend Nick Foles take care of business against the Brady and Belichick combo. But yeah, fun driving through that part of the world. Is that where you're at? You're in Indiana?
You were about 45 minutes from me as you're driving to South Bend. I'm in Fort Wayne.
Okay, cool.
Our company is fully remote, which really helps us in many ways. I'm not stuck to a single locality for finding people. I don't really care where they live, just have a good internet connection. And it's actually helped us broaden our support hours without having to do anything special.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the problem with remote work, though, we've probably talked about this before, but hey, we're in it. Obviously different states, especially here in the US and all their rules, but also, like, I'm doing it right now, right? Because I got a lot of people remote, and sometimes you got to bring them together in one place in order to, like, get things kind of over the hump, right? Like, all about screen time. We all do it, and I love smart people. You're right, wherever they're at. But sometimes in order to, like, get the juices flowing, right, and like the creative energy kind of started, sometimes you gotta get them together, man.
There's a lot to be said about the office environment still. I
Yeah,
do miss it.
yeah, 100%. It's interesting. I was watching, you flip through all these feeds now, and I was watching a quick video, probably on Instagram if I remember, and it's like, hey, the work environment's changed, right? It's like, go back 100 years ago till now, right? It's like, the car has changed, the transportation's changed, whatever, and it's like the classroom is almost exactly the same. It's like education really hasn't changed in 100 years, right? Sorry, just going on a cuff. So Don, for people, this is the first time you've been on the show.
Yep.
For people who don't even know who you are, Don, why don't you give them a little bit of background and walk down memory lane? Give them how did you get into the whole thing, and like, what brings you to present day?
I'll try and summarize it because it's like this long. My first words as a kid was turn on, turn off. So it starts there. My mom said she always knew I was going to be a business owner. She failed to mention that until I was a business owner, but always knew I'd do something with electronics. My degree is in electronics. I started in wireless communications, climbing radio towers. Towards the end, I was installing 911 dispatch centers, which was unique because in college, I also joined a volunteer fire department and later getting my EMS certification. So after moving around and getting the full-time position in wireless, I was actually a certified advanced EMTI medic too. So I volunteered doing that on the side. I did that for like 21 years. So that worked hand in hand with the 911 dispatch centers for sure. I think a lot of that background really has helped me moving forward as a technical engineer, moving up into the realms of being a business owner and helping others, because I had to make life altering decisions in seconds, and there's no guesswork. So I think that's really helped me. The electronics background, I think, helped me with problem solving too. So Novell came into the hemisphere, so that got me excited. And there was a computer company coming into our company to do the networking, and just, I don't know, I fell in love. Ended up knowing the owner's son, who was friends of the people next door. Got to know them. Later was told, hey, if you want a real job, come talk. Ended up getting the job, so I jumped into IT. did my MCSE in 99. Now I'm dating myself. And then that company was sold to a different individual. Unfortunately, it doesn't matter how old a company is, strategy and what's the word I'm looking for? The core means everything. I watched one person take a company of almost 20 years and run it into the ground in less than 2 years. Meanwhile, I didn't realize that most of the customers thought I was the owner.
Huh.
So I saw all this happening. There was a lot of illegal stuff going on. So jumped ship, started my own company, brought one of the techs with me as a co-founder, started that up. Meanwhile, um, fell in love with ConnectWise. We brought it into our company. And while you think
Did Arnie do your install?
no, Michelle, I'm going to mess up the last name, Ingram.
Okay.
I was her first implementation. She did a good job, but Arnie had just got done getting, being in the trenches doing it, so I missed out on that. But it's so funny, and it shows how powerful strategies, operation, policies, and everything. There's reasons for this stuff, and I designed forms. There was only us two owners doing support, and Andrew Morgan was my salesman. And,
Wow.
he told me, hey, you're going to see RI in this amount of time. I went back to him and I'm like, I'm going to update your ROI to 45 days
Okay.
because his was like 6 months minimum, if not a lot longer.
I would say if you got it working in 45 days, you're the exception to the rule there, Don.
Well, I don't know that I had it fully working, but we noticed revenue change in 45 days.
Okay.
In 1 month, all of a sudden my partner is like, we have money in the bank. And thought we were doing really due diligence on time tracking and all that. So it comes to show you how well a properly designed PSA system can really make changes for your business. And that's one of the things that so Visionary 360. Well, I decided to make a change in life because all I did was talk about ConnectWise. I was constantly helping partners, especially after joining HTG peer groups, which was mind altering experience that I don't know how much I can say how much I love Arlen. Just everything was awesome. It changed our business. We were at 30% plus growth each year due to HTG, steering us. We thought we were doing good. Well, they showed us otherwise. And it was amazing. But my love for ConnectWise, especially since they turned into a sponsor, just kept going and going. So eventually I decided, hey, let's go do this full time. So Matt Zaroff had been beating on me to join him at Visionary. So I joined the ranks and here I am today doing what I enjoy doing, helping people. I like this software package. I love seeing what we can do helping people, especially, I mean, I have one client that, I knew he was in the rough. I didn't know he was in the rough until 2 years later after I'd got done with their project. I thought he was just having, bad business decisions, needed PSA revamped. We took care of all of that. And his business skyrocketed. He went from less than 700K to now he's around 2 mil in a couple of years. That's not bad growth.
No, it's good.
But what I found out 2 years later when I met him in person at IT Nation was he was about to close the doors.
Oh,
And working with him for his lack of words is kept him in business. Those are the stories that, keep me doing this. So will I retire? I don't know.
it's funny. Remember back in the day when The Apprentice was a thing, and
Hmm.
like if you got a job offer at the end of The Apprentice, you were supposed to like it was almost like you were going into office, right? You had to like sell off your business in order to take this gig, right? You couldn't do both. I remember this guy who had a cigar company, and like the cigar company was $1 million company, and I was pretty young at the time, and I was like, $1 million company, that's a lot of money. But $1 million in this sandbox is really not a lot of money.
What's the gross profit is the underlying question.
Right. Yeah. You could be making. Now, I was actually just talking to my team down the hallway, and I was like, "Hey, did you see that documentary on Uber? You see that documentary on WeWork? Right? Like some of these companies are in the red for a decade. Just hedging their bet. Right? Like Uber is hedging their bet that the self-driving car finally gets approved, and then they don't need drivers in it. Right? And then they're right there. Right? But they're still in the red. Right? Did they actually post a profit until like a decade into the story? Probably not. But at the end of the day, right? Like, are you actually, I know this is so cliche. I hate to use it, but are you too busy working in the business rather than on the business? And if you're working too much in the business, hey, listen, I get you. We all love it, right? We all love the blinking lights and, fixing things. Like, I mean, part of the reason I got into the whole technology realm was it's like you're opening up new toys every day, right? Like
Yeah.
it's new.
Shiny new things.
Yeah. And until nobody wants to spend money, and then you're looking at really old. But I digress. Um, but putting out fires, man, it sends you and me to the same barber, I think. And like, you work, and we hear it all the time, right? Especially people in the early days, right? Under the desk, no vacations, nights, weekends, answering calls 2 o'clock in the morning, and there's a lot of leakage through all of that, right? Kind of like to your story, right? The guy's, not doing well, and then all of a sudden, the business, skyrocketed, probably because he wasn't billing for all the stuff that he should have. And by the time he finally caught up to it, look at the difference in 24 month span, right? But to your example, um, I'm going to say one thing. I want to see what your opinion is.
Okay.
The IT and managed services business is a hard business. And I argue that it's so hard that you should question whether you want to go down this road or try something else. What do you think?
What I tell clients that I work with, and Rec before, as I'm getting into this, Rex Frank and I have calls once in a while like this. And we were laughing one day as we both got off some calls. In our practice, I say we wear 3 different hats. The first hat is a software implementation specialist. We consult on a software package.
Mhm.
But for that to work, which most people don't get, you have to have good business processes.
Mhm.
Most don't have anything. Thus, I take that hat off, put on the business consulting coach. And then you get into the therapist hat.
I feel like any business that has to go through some of the more formal, like SOC 2, CMMC, like those compliance frameworks, all of a sudden you walk into it, and the first thing you say is like, I don't have written policies and procedures for all these things. Like 90% of it is that, right? Like 10% of it's implementation, 90% of it's documentation, policies, procedures. And the average IT services company, managed services companies, they don't have those written down. Like
Com-
they're learning as they go.
CompTIA Security Trust Mark helped my company back when I was an MSP put that stuff in place. It was an eye opener. And back then, that was before SAS 70 became, it was on the verge of becoming the norm. And I was told this is pretty much at the time, and I was a beta tester for CompTIA on that program. But I was told if you have this in place, you could pass the SAS 70 certification. Now that was 15 years ago, but it's still a great program. But when I'm talking with customers about managed services, everybody's so worried about the packages and this and that, which are important, but I don't know, 50, 60% of them get it and they have it fine tuned. For me, the number one problem I feel any managed service provider is going to have isn't the techie side. Most are, they kick butt on the techie side. The problem is customer management, account management. You're going to have clients saying, hey, why am I paying you? You get a client asking you, why am I paying you this monthly? And then your question is, well, everything's working great, isn't it? And they said, yes, better than ever. It's easy for us to say, well, that's why you're paying me.
Mhm.
And we've all been there with the reports, and even Arnie started that, the executive reports and this and the gadgets and all that, which shiny object, it's great, but at the end of the day, that still doesn't satisfy. So it really comes down to those quarterly business reviews. I like quarterly technology reviews. Most people are not certified business consultants like a CPA and stuff. So let's take it back to technology and budgeting and things like that. But you also, there's a fine line, is independent upon how big the company is, how many people do you have to do this? If it's the salesman always doing these meetings, when I was an MSP, my partner did the sales side and I was operations, service, and all the rest. He walks in, the first thing people say, hide the checkbook. I literally heard that in so many places. I walk in and they're like, what do you think? Should we do it or not?
Well,
So I
I mean,
became the trusted advisor and he was the salesman. So
you know,
if there's learning lessons, it's how to be a salesperson without being a salesperson,
right,
how
this
to make yourself seen as that trusted advisor and not sales.
yeah,
It's hard.
consultative
Yeah.
sales, right? I mean, but how many times do we feel the other side of this, right, Don? I mean, and this is an analogy that's been said 1,000 times, but it fits right here. You go to the doctor, puts you on the scale, runs your blood work, comes back like, hey, dude, you need to do like this, and this, or else you're gonna be in a bad way real soon. And you're like, oh, okay, and you take that for face value, and then all of a sudden you start hopefully working on it. But when the technology guy, girl, person comes through and says, hey, you need to, add this, and security needs to be tightened up here, and we need to do a little bit more training here, and this, that, and the other. They're like, okay, maybe we'll get to it later, and then it never happens. Why
Right.
is it, Don? Like, has this business become to the point where people view it as a commodity, and they're like, hey, it's cool. I'll call you when I need you, unless the building's on fire. Not necessarily going to rush to do anything.
Yes, it is, especially when, oh, well, my nephew says I can do this. Oh,
Mm.
your nephew in middle school. Okay. Um, the one thing our community channel is lacking is regulation. And I know none of us want to hear it, but I'm sorry, we need it. Um, I know Carl Palachak is working on stuff along with a few others. At the end of the day, it's only to protect everybody that has put their weight and heart into what they do. Doctors go through it. And the other side of the coin is most people that start businesses are geeks. They're techs. They love fixing stuff. I was one of them. We're not really trained in financials, reviewing the P&Ls. Kind of get it, but and don't want to touch it until all of a sudden you're in disaster. Goes along with the sales side. I mean, how many doctors can you walk into and they say, well, which of these 3 pain meds do you want? Which of these 3 antibiotics do you want? No one. Now, granted, I did have my one doctor do that years ago, but he also knew I was a medic, and I'm like, so I just look at him and say, "You're the doctor, you tell me," which is how it should be in our industry. You know, we are the professionals telling them what they need to do. There's
So,
also so many different types, and I'm going to say levels in our industry, which kind of comes back to regulations and such. You get this provider lowballing, 50 cents over and, trying to get in. Um, you got this guy that just doesn't want to do anything. So he's just going to not sell that and then itemize it. It's all over the place.
yeah,
And
listen, I'm going to give you an example, and I'm sure you've heard this 1,000 times, but
yeah,
got to go somewhere.
yep.
It's the customer who like, hey, I really need this. I heard so and so has this setup. Can you get this for me? You're like, yeah, sure, we can set you up. And you start working through, and then all of a sudden they're like, yeah, okay, it's good enough. The car's running. Give me the keys, and I'll let you know when I need you. And then they crash the damn car. I mean, this scenario happens all the time. And then, quite frankly, by the time they call you and you're like, hey, dude, it's a wreck. Ain't no salvaging it. We got to restart from scratch. And you're like, I don't want to go through that again. And it's like, well, like you already paid for it once. You bought the car, the Ferrari, you crashed it because you didn't know how to drive it. Like this isn't, break fix. Call me when your car needs service. Like you need to keep this thing in a way where it's working. It always comes down to Don, two things in my mind. One, customer doesn't value what you do. They think once, you did the hard part up front, I can use it now, right? I don't, you don't need to be around. Two, all the big tech companies, right? Let's call it the Microsofts and the Apples and the Googles, and I could keep going on and on. They've kind of marketed this to, hey man, it's so easy, a caveman can do it. You don't like, just pick it up and start using it. And I feel like that has really devalued the professional service that our industry offers.
Until they log into Amazon or Azure and they're like, ah,
Yeah.
yeah. I see too many people devaluing themselves, their services, and then they wonder why they're not respected
Yeah.
or taken seriously. Too many people discount their hourly rate. Too many people discounts. There's a time and a place for a discount, but never devalue you, your services, or your company ever. I was on one of the Facebook groups and it was web development, and everybody was whining about a hosting service and they included this one plugin with it. I'm like, just buy a site license, an agency license. That simple. Well, the costs and blah blah blah, and I'm like, this is all passed on to your customers. Well, and yeah, and they ended up going around and around, and he's like, well, it's not that I don't. I'm like, well, that's not what you said. I'm sorry, but cogs are cogs. It's either operation cost, but it doesn't matter if it's an operation cost. Someone has to pay for that. So do you want to make money or not?
Yeah.
And some of this really comes back to, the employers. It really goes back to education, but our education system isn't going there. I don't believe most people understand where their paycheck comes from. And my training and services, okay, it's simple. You have two pocketbooks that are going to pay your paycheck. The owner, the client. When the client pays, there's profit. That profit helps pay for that PTO time, sick time, those little perks and all that good fun stuff, your bonuses, those shiny tools that your boss is paying for to help you do the job better. But when it comes from the boss's billfold, there's no profit. There's no extra money. There's no perks. There's no bonuses, nothing. Which do you want? And at
Yeah.
least it can have a tendency to open the eyes.
Well,
But
so big picture, if I were to concentrate on, hey, we can't you can't build Rome in a day. Let's concentrate on like one, two, or three areas to like make sure that the health of the company in this IT services, managed services sandbox is good, right? And in my mind, my three things may be different than your three things. Let's see. Number one is you need to understand how your company is valued and how it makes money and how it profits. Those two things are all tied into, do you understand the metrics and the way that your company grows or doesn't? And so that way, what you're working backwards from, in my opinion, or towards, however you look at it, rather than just, hey, let's see what the bank account shows in that then December 31st, right? So that's bucket number one, the finances, the structure, how do you make money? Bucket number two is, hey, man, you could run around putting out fires like the fire department all day long. Like you will burn out. It's absolutely coming, whether you believe it or not, and that's not sustainable, right? So how do you set things up in such a way that the day-to-day operations of the company is, middle of the road, consistent, right? Not like this roller coaster, because otherwise, you'll get to hit a brick wall. It may not be for a while, but you'll get there. So that's bucket number two, right? We said bucket number one, finance, company structure, how do you make money? Bucket number two, operations, right? Let's get this thing to a point where it's like not on fire. And then bucket number three, has got to be, the people part. And then there's two sides to that, right? There's the employees, the internal morale, the makeup of your company. And then there's the clientele, right? Who are you working with? Are they the right customer? Is this a good fit or is it square peg round hole? So, but like those are my main three buckets. And there's probably 30 other buckets, but if you can get the foundation of those three things correctly in place, I think you can stand on top of that. Now, I'm curious whether my buckets are the same as yours, but I'm going to let you tell me what you think.
nailed it. And I'll put it with how we do our PSA consulting. We start with accounting. Does not even touching the PSA yet. We're talking QuickBooks, whatever you're using for accounting, chart of accounts. HTG, Service Leadership Index, is what caused Visionary 360 to be born. That was because we all joined HTG, and this was back in 2008, 2009.
Early
Arlen,
days.
yeah, Arlen, I've actually been to the farm. There is a farm. They brought service leadership in, and everybody's having a cow because chart of accounts weren't, even close. How do we make things, how do we make these reports? So that's actually what started Visionary 360 to where we are today. So we start with the chart of accounts. Why? Every time entry in a PSA is a dollar sign. And at the end of the day, we need to know where it's going to route to. So if we know what we're going to map to, that's part of the equation. Otherwise, it's garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
I can take everything from a PSA and put it to one revenue account. Great. I've got a P&L that shows cost, revenue, and here's my profit. Does that help you and I as a business owner? Okay, we know, whether we're red or black, but it doesn't tell us anything about our business operations. What area of our company is doing well? What area of our company sucking right now and needs help?
Well, it's also the valuation of your company. We've had Reed Warren from IT Valuations is one that's been on several times, and he's like, listen, if you go to sell your business or even just borrow money against your business, the valuation of your company and the structure of your financials could mean a huge variance, like literally 50% difference between what you can do and what you can't. And to me, that's just, you started from behind, right? Like if you started with, hey, if you set it up this way from the beginning and you start feeding these entries at the end of the year, 5 years, whatever, 8, 10 years, like you can actually chart everything properly. And so if somebody came in from the outside who knew nothing about your business, they could come in and say, all right, we give you the highest valuation possible, rather than, hey, your financials are a bit gray and murky and I can't get answers. So because we can't get answers, I can't give you the best credit score, basically.
Yep. And that's where service leadership kind of comes in. Just setting up the chart of accounts is one thing. Taking that data and knowing how to use it, that's where SLI, shine. So, starting with that, and then, for lack of better words, we start with foundations. That's the brick and mortar of the PSA setup. Everything, basically all the setup tables. But as I like to tell people, if you look at the structure in ConnectWise PSA or any of the PSAs, think of, if you're a geek, think of Active Directory. The root, all the OU, the security, OUs, all of that. That's part of the foundation setup. You can't set anything else up without that properly, set up. Everyone knows if you botch an AD system, what happens.
Oh, so many bad things happen. It's a domino effect.
And once you use something in ConnectWise and most PSAs, you cannot back out of it.
Yeah.
So, and if you have OCD like I do, only, the administrators can see all this crap in the back end. It drives me nuts. So I want to keep it all nice and clean.
No, I get that.
So,
I know some people
yeah,
have, yeah, they put 8 years, 5 years, 10 years of data in, and then they go to almost have to restart because it's
yeah.
like, it's like built up, right? And you're like, all right, well, we can't really delete anything, so let's just, create a fresh one.
Then, from that point, building on processes, proven processes. And that's, kind of one of the areas that we help provide is, again, most don't have a direction on which way to go. More the smaller companies, especially those starting out of the gate. So it's okay. Here's some proven processes which can be built upon, tweaked, and as you grow, they can be attended to. So, the power of the service boards, especially the workflows. I always joke and tell people, once we get done with workflows, I'm giving you a full-time employee that works 365, 24/7.
Yeah.
That's the power of workflows. As long as they're properly designed and doesn't put you back in email hell.
Well, I feel
But
like this, and again, maybe going off topic a little bit, but every 3, 4, 5 years, talked about this a bunch lately, right? Like the new marketing term comes in, right? Now, one term went from hosted to cloud, then we went from security to cyber security, then we went to, now we're in AI land. I feel like the background concept of workflows is now getting somehow grayed into AI. Maybe that's just marketing, right? Instead of real practicality, but
I think AI is becoming a brother to the workflow engine.
okay.
Sometimes I think stepsister, but it depends upon how they're intertwined.
Yeah.
But yeah. Um, one of the things, and you were going back to, basically people like, what's the words I'm looking for? They're tired, they're worn out.
Yeah. Burnout.
When we bring in employees, and as they grow within our companies, they become extremely valuable. And one of the things that I see with companies is lack of documentation.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got a blog written on this. I brought this as a best practice to HTG back in the day. Those valuable employees, usually don't take vacations like they should because they're workaholics. So, my thought is, if you can, best case scenarios every quarter, make those employees take a week off, period. Disconnected. I don't want to see you. I'm even going to turn off your access if I see you accessing. Allow the fires to happen. We do the best we can. Only reach out if the world's upside down on fire, it's going to kill a business. The cool thing about doing this is they're coming back. Now we can debrief and we can write up these SOPs that we should have written up a long time ago. And by continually doing this, we're building rock solid SOPs. And the beauty is it's a cycle, and these people keep coming back to help us build these stronger. Unlike one of these key players, gets into a car wreck, stroke, heart attack, who knows, something bad happens. You've lost that data. It's a hard drive that went bad with no backup.
It's a good explanation, actually. I feel like documentation, man, we could talk probably for hours about it, but like let's put these two topics side by side for a second. Standard operating procedures, how, what is the expectation? Again, a lot of these people are like, I don't have that. Like, we just kind of do it, right? And then the other part is, like, because they feed hand in hand, right? It's like, all right, yeah, I need passwords and, sign in information, this type of stuff, right? But it's like, I need to collect information. I need to park it somewhere anyway. But like, and maybe this is where the AI part can maybe help, right? But no structure. The person who's following it, the person who wrote it, maybe they can follow it, but maybe the other person's like, this is another language to me. I can't even follow it. And then, like being able to standardize on something, right? I feel like because everybody comes from a different angle, how do you get that function?
Yeah, well, I always said back in the day when I first started that I was not going to hire any employees until we had a full subset of SOPs in place. 7 employees later, I still didn't have that. And we're trying to build it as we went. I mean, you can't stop business from growing. Usually, what really helped me get that stuff built, and anybody that knows me knows I preach peer groups. I preach. It's, I think, one of the best things that a person can do for themselves and for their company is to join a peer group. I don't care what peer group you join. It's not as much about what group, but the people in that group are forever. Just from those people, you're going to learn things, and it's like automatically having a board of directors. And while they're your buddies, they're going to call you out, and they will not think.
That's part of the fun of it, I hear.
Oh yes, it is. It's awesome, but that's what helps, because all of a sudden everybody learns that we're not that different. I'm standing at a ConnectWise user group in the lunch line. For once, I'm being quiet and just listening. I know it's hard to believe. And I was having some employee HR issues. It's like everything syncs. I heard 3 others talking about employee issues, dang near the same issue I was having. So, when you realize this, you start sharing information, you sharing documents, you start helping each other build your documents. All of a sudden, wow, we've got a full set of SOPs in place. And there's other consulting, different levels of consulting that can help you build those lists. So the question is, do you have the time to build it on your own? Or are you going to be light years ahead paying for some help?
Well, to your point, right? And I think I've said this 1,000 times. I'm sure Ken's, echoed this when I've had him on. Like this castle mentality, right? And this doesn't just happen in our industry, by the way. It happens in a lot of industries. But like, it's like, hey, you're all my competitors. Here's the moat with the alligators. We're not friends, right? And then like you have this other mentality, which is the community mentality, which is like, hey, listen, we're all in it. There's plenty of business out there for everyone. And like, we're better together, growing as a group and maturing than, everybody being on their own. Right. And so, clearly you discovered this back in, in the early days, right? Like some of the knowledge you get in the room with peers doing what you're doing is stuff that you like. Some people may be ahead of you, right, in their journey. And like these are things you didn't even think about because you just didn't get there yet. And then the
Yes.
other part of it is things change, right? Like nothing's totally static and constant where what was working yesterday is going to work tomorrow, right? Sometimes you need to adjust. And by hearing people who are doing the same adjustments around you, you don't have to discover that on your own. And then the last thing on this whole thought track is, hey man, like this industry is at the point where, if there's money coming in from the outside, right? If there's investment dollars coming in from the outside, if there's mergers and acquisitions that are happening on the top end, that means this thing is like measurable, right? Like there's actually a proven and accepted blueprint. Like I think we all love being in technology, but the business of technology is a proven mature business. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think if we can all agree to the things that I just laid out, it really changes the outlook a little bit.
And it kind of goes to what I saw on a blog post today from Ireland Sorensen, whether or not to hire a professional president for your company, because he had just sold off interest in one of his companies, and it kind of made a lot of sense. And I do know a lot of companies where the owners are actually just one of the service techs. That's what they love doing. Dabbled in, the upper C-level area, and is like, I don't want any part of this, and hired people to do the job.
I mean,
And it might
so
be ego hurt, but
yeah,
at the end of the day, how well do you want the company to do?
I mean, listen, that's fair. I'll give you a real world example. Yesterday, so an investment group bought the Washington Commanders football team, right, from Dan Snyder. And so they hired a basketball executive to be the president of the organization yesterday. I was like, how does that work cross sports? Like, does the same thing that happens on the left work on the right? Like, feels like it could be apple orange. But he real like obviously if you trust the guy enough to put him at the top of the food chain and say run this business, I would think some of the principles are the same. It has to be.
I can see the principles being somewhat similar, but the way I'm looking at it is I've still got the people underneath that are still going to be there to help. You've got the new one coming in with a fully different set of views. And now we're taking some new views, and they're both feeding each other. So it could be interesting.
I always, feel like, you always hear about, hey, the CEO or the executive that comes in, what they do is they start hiring people around them to fill in the things that they're not good at, right? So that way,
Yes.
as a group, they're pretty, like 360, right? No, pun intended. They're like, hey, we as an organization, we have interlocked the right people so that the right talent is in the room to get the job done. But like the CEO is like, basically empowering people and installing people, right, to go in and do their part in their department, right? I feel like some of this stuff though, Don, and I'm sure you've experienced different size organizations over the year, just size matters. Maybe they don't have enough revenue to install these people, right? And that's where the
Yeah.
multi-hat thing comes in. And two, like, the maturity of the business, and have they gotten to a point where they're willing to, and let go of all of these pieces and trust somebody else.
I think the number one thing that hinders all of us, and I'm a gym addict. So, at one of the two gyms I go to, they have a sign that says leave egos here. And there's a lot to be said for that. And between at the gym what I call ego lifting, which always you end up getting hurt. The same thing could be for business. And I think a lot of us could, learn from what I was taught again years ago, that when you walk through that door, you're no longer an owner, you're an employee, and you should act like one. You might be at a higher level than the rest, but you're an employee working for that corporation, and you can be replaced.
Interesting. So on the tail end here, or in the final stretch, who are the people that would best benefit from what Visionary 360 does? Is there like, hey, if you're struggling in these areas, pick up the phone and call, or hey, if you get to this certain size, pick up the phone and call, or you tell us what is the right situation?
So we work with companies of 1 to 2 people
Okay.
just purchasing the system, to companies that I think our largest has over 600 plus licenses.
Okay.
Pretty big company. I've again, if you just purchased it, it's we have actually a special program called a fast track, which is designed just for that. But I've worked with people that have had it for 12 years and have never had it set up properly.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, just about anyone can be helped by our services in one way or another. The number one problem that we see with the PSA setup is because we look at things from a financial focus side, none of that typically is set up right. So the number one thing we usually hear is either A, we need help with accounting and integration because we're doing double entry. Like, oh my God, you know how much time spending? To we don't like our financial reporting. They could have a properly set up system, but their accounting, the chart of accounts are horrid, for lack of better words, and everything goes to one account. So, or it kind of goes with that. The setup, things aren't aligned properly, so we're not getting those time entries following correctly. That's probably the first area of help that we see, the biggest challenge with people. Second, most people aren't utilizing workflows, and we love automation. We're constantly adding automation to our system. And like our admin team, there's only so many hours in the day. And if there's something repetitive that can be automated, do it. You're freeing time up. So, if anything, you're reducing the stress level for the employees so they function better and need less sick time.
It's fair. I
Um,
mean, I think, okay. Well, I mean, basically on that front, it's about scale, right? You can get through to certain places, certain sizes, certain revenues by hand. But then
yeah,
once you get to a certain point, like it becomes
there's a
inundated.
point where the setup doesn't allow you to expand and grow. You're being hindered because of the current setup.
Yeah. It's a good point.
Or on the other side, I just got done with one that purchased the system. Actually, we joined HCG in the same day, so we're dating back then, and had bought it probably about the same time I had bought mine in 05, 06. They'd used it for 12 plus years, never been tweaked. And there was a lot of changes that we had to do for it. So now they're up and running, full suite of automation. They had some in place, but not near as much as they should. And their customer support team is just fanatic right now about the changes because things got easier. Instead of 6 steps to do something, now there might be 1 or 2 steps.
Yeah, letting the system work for you instead of you having to work in the system.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's the main complaint with any system. Anytime I say the word Salesforce, that comes with a lot of commas and zeros, whether you believe it or, whether you want to agree to it or not, you get
Lots of
there.
zeros.
And then you look at it and you're like, man, this thing's so clunky. I don't even know how it can function. Once you get it working properly, then the
Yeah.
system starts doing things for you rather than you doing for it. But I mean, I could throw other names out there. I mean, bottom line is, back to the Ferrari analogy, right? It's like, hey, you got this crazy, super advanced system, and if you don't know how to use it, you're literally paying for 90% of the thing to sit in the garage. So
I'm getting a reminder ping on Teams. 'Cause Matthew's watching, but he reminded me of our one slogan is we save people a minimum of 7 hours administrative time a week.
that's a lot.
That's a lot. Imagine if their accounting's not integrated.
Well, I mean, it's not just there's the other side of it, Don, which I don't think we touched on. One of the main areas that MSPs, IT service providers leak oil on is the fact that they have 30, 40, 50 vendors that they're acquiring technology from, and they're not capturing all of that in their invoicing. And then by the time they
Cogs.
figure it out, like talking about serious dollars.
Agreement module. I tell everybody before we even start, you will have homework on agreements. You will hate agreements. You will sleep well once we're done with agreements. Because hardly anyone captures anything in their agreements, especially in the COG side. Their tools, it's all written off in the wrong way. It should be written towards that agreement. How well do you, I mean, yes, our agreements, we're making bucko profits on this. Are you really? If you're not capturing all that stuff, are you really?
I would think that I've been around long enough to know that a lot of those 40, 50, 30 vendors, low margin things, right? Could be $1 here, $2 here, whatever. So if you're only marking it up by 10%, 15%, whatever it is, and you're not billing for the right quantities, whatever you thought you were making, you're just losing money, right? Like that's how you leave.
Let me put it this way. One of my clients, once we were done, and they hadn't fully gotten through everything because they had to restructure their legal side. We found, this is like my top number so far, it was around like 15,000 a month that they were given away in discounts or lost revenue because their agreements were not set up properly.
Oof. Dude, that's real money.
And that was just the beginning. I think it had to be larger than that. This was a $6 million company.
Yeah, I don't care.
That right there, that
I
would
don't
pay
care how.
for a couple tier 3 engineers.
Yeah, no, that's real money. I don't care how much money you're making. Sure. Don, I really appreciate you jumping on. I know we're coming up against the hour. Where do people find out more about the company? How do they reach out to you? Where do they learn more?
Simple, visionary360.com. Especially go to our blogs, sign up for our blogs. We typically every Monday we send out a blog with no salesy tips, tricks, things like this webinar, things coming up in the industry, especially with ConnectWise with the new Osio platform. As that stuff comes out, we're privy to a lot of it, but we can't show a lot of it until we're told, okay, you can go. But we'll be showing how to, what's coming, what's going to be billed, what's going to be free, and all of that stuff. Lessons from the trenches, all that. But visionary360.com, there's the contact us, there's the phone number there as well.
I like calling. I don't know about everybody
Yeah.
else. This session was recorded. We'll post it online shortly. We'll definitely find it under mspinitiative.com under sessions. And again, we'll throw it into the podcatcher and the YouTube and all that good stuff. But it's there. We definitely recorded it. There's so much more behind Don's story, right? But I think we just touched the surface of a lot of different areas just to kind of give you a 30,000 foot overview, right? Of like the areas, right? But bottom line is, in this business, you need automation. In this business, you need something to help you scale it. Don't buy it and not set it up properly because, man, that's just a waste of time and money.
And then when all that fails, there's the bourbon and the shoulders to lean on at the events.
there's a lot of that. I can promise you, 100%. Don, thanks for joining. Everyone who's watching this or will watch this, we appreciate you for jumping in. Again, we do these all the time. I think twice a week still. And check us out, mspinitiative.com. Check out visionary360.com. Don, catch you on the flip side, my friend.
See you. Thank you.
Take it easy.